Welcome to resume and cover letter development. If you already have a resume, now would be a good time to go ahead and get it out so that you can follow along and make any changes and updates as needed. If you don't have a resume, I recommend that you open up a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word document so that you can start building one. So before we get into how to build your resume and your cover letter, let's kind of think through why is this important? So what is in it for you? So at the end of this presentation, you are going to start working on creating a resume that's going to be necessary for you to apply to internships, on-campus jobs, full-time and part-time jobs, scholarship and leadership opportunities. You're also going to discover whether your current resume checks the boxes on the professionalism and communication career competencies that we'll talk about here in just a minute. And then you're going to learn how to create a cover letter that you're going to use to accompany your resume. So career competencies showcase an individual's knowledge and behavior that leads them to be successful in their career. The National Association of Colleges and Employers, also known as NACE, have defined 8 competencies that are the top areas employers across all industries highly value. These are critical thinking, communication, teamwork, technology, leadership, professionalism, career and self-development, and equity and inclusion. Resume and cover letter development focuses on the professionalism and communication competencies as mentioned previously. These marketing pieces that you build should be error-free and communicate your value as a candidate in a clear and concise manner. So let's get into resumes. Want to start by talking a little bit about the difference between a foundational resume and a tailored resume. So a foundational resume is a document that you're going to want to create to kind of help you keep track of all of the experiences and credentials and skills that you develop over time. The foundational document is something that you are not going to send to an employer. So again, this document is for your benefit. And so having said that, the foundational resume can be any page length. It can be organized by any category. You can use any vocabulary that you want. And so this is going to serve as a foundation for you to create a tailored resume that you're going to want to use as you're applying for those on-campus jobs, those scholarship opportunities, those internships, etc. So the tailored resume is going to be about 1 to 2 pages in length. And so we would normally recommend a 1-page resume for undergraduate students. A 2-page resume is going to be a good fit for maybe a graduate student or somebody with significant work experience. And so the idea here is that you're tailoring a resume for a specific position because that is what the employer is looking for. They're looking for relevant experiences, relevant skills that match what is in that job description. So you're going to use the job description to create this tailored resume. So you want it to be specific to the employer and then specific to the vocabulary that's in the job description. So take a minute to answer this question. How long will an employer typically spend reviewing your resume? 45 to 60 seconds, 1 to 2 minutes, 10 to 20 seconds, or as much time as needed to read all content. If you guessed C, 10 to 20 seconds, then you're right. Employers do not spend very long reviewing resumes, so that means tailoring your resume for the opportunity is important and that your document is organized, easy to read, so that you can convey that relevance very quickly. So these are the basic resume components that we're going to discuss. You have your heading at the top, you have your education section and possibly honors and awards, relevant experience, campus involvement, additional sections like this one, community involvement and other work experience, and then skills. Now, keep in mind that everyone's resume is going to look a little bit different. So some of these sections may not necessarily make sense for you and they may make sense for others. So just keep that in mind as you're building your resume. So we're going to start with the heading. So there are different components to the heading. You're going to have your name, you're going to have your email address, your phone number. And then we would recommend to insert your LinkedIn profile URL or your portfolio or website if you have one. With your physical address, you don't necessarily need to include that. That is something that we used to include a long time ago, but now we've kind of moved away from that. If you want to include something that directs the employer to your geographic location, then you could certainly list the state and the city where you live. Keep in mind that if you are using your Charlotte email address, you're going to want to update that to the charlotte.edu format. Moving along to education, you'll want to list all of the institutions where you've received a degree. So what you'll do is you'll start with the degree that you're currently working on, whether that's a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a PhD. You're going to start with that degree first, and then you're going to work your way back. So as somebody that might be pursuing a bachelor's degree, what you would do after that is you would list an associate's degree if you have one. If you don't have an associate's degree, you don't list that. For first and second year students, it may make sense for you to list your high school information. If you were in a situation where you're trying to fill out your resume document, then listing your high school can be an option. Otherwise, once you get to kind of that second, third year, it's going to make sense for you to remove the high school information from your resume, so that then we're just concentrating on this education and experience from your current degree that you're seeking. So you're going to want to list the degree that you're pursuing, and you're going to want to spell that out. So Bachelor of Science in Earth and Environmental Sciences as an example. And then you want to list the date of your expected graduation using the month and then the year that you're going to be graduating. You're also going to want to include the institution's name. So in our instance, it's going to be University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and the location, which is Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, if you have a minor or a concentration area or any sort of area of emphasis, this is a good place to list that. And then you can also include something like your GPA if you want to. This is an optional thing that you can list on your resume. What we recommend in the Career Center and what is pretty standard is to list your GPA if it's a 3.0 or above. Okay, so pause the video and take 2 to 3 minutes to work on your heading and education sections. So now we're going to move into our experience section, which is arguably the most important section. So your experience is not necessarily just paid work that you have done. Your experience is going to be relevant experiences to that role. And so this could be certainly a paid job. It could be a paid part-time job, a paid full-time job, a paid internship. It could also be something like a course project or a personal project that you may have worked on, or it could be an experience that maybe you did as a volunteer or in a leadership role or as part of a student club or an organization. So there are a lot of different options that you can use to kind of build an experience section that's related to the role that you're applying for. And so as part of that section, you want to make sure that you're listing the organization or company name, the location of that company, your title or role, and then the dates of that experience. So that's going to be kind of the start of that particular experience that you're going to talk about. And then underneath that information, you are going to include, maybe 3 to 5, it just really depends, bullet points or bullet statement that describe a skill, responsibility, or an accomplishment related to that role. And then you want to start those bullet points with strong action verbs. And a couple of these are mentioned right here. So designed, managed, and assisted are all examples of action verbs. And so if you're looking for a formula to kind of help you with creating this bullet point, here's one below that we recommend. So you're going to start with the action verb, also known as a power verb, and then you're going to add what you did. And then at the end, you're going to talk about the why or any results that you may have. So what was the impact? And so an example of this bullet point formula here in action would be attended to bar patrons while simultaneously communicating with servers to fill drink orders. So in this instance, you can see that attended is the power verb. The phrase to bar patrons while simultaneously communicating with servers is what this person did, and the results was, or the why was, to fill drink orders. So here are a couple of experienced examples that we've pulled from our career guide. And these are pretty general so that you can kind of get a sense of the different types of experiences that you might need to use in your resume, depending on, the role that you're applying for. So again, this may not necessarily look like what you would include on your resume, but these are some examples of what you could include, and then really how you're going to organize that on your resume. So again, you want it to be clear, concise, to the point. You want to use the strong action verbs, and you want to use that bullet point formula to state what it is that you did or accomplished at each of those experiences. So we have something that is more kind of educational. We have something that is kind of in the restaurant customer service industry. And then moving on to this next page, we have an example from more of kind of a working with children as a nanny experience. And so if you scan this QR code, what it's going to do, it's going to bring you to our career guide, which you can download to your computer. And so you'll be able to find lots of other examples of experiences and other resources to kind of help you design your resume document. So pause this video and take a few minutes, about 5 minutes, to work on your experience section. So we're going to move into some different resume sections that may or may not make sense for you. It just kind of depends on your experience and what you want to include on your resume. But these are some good things to think about, including in your resume, so that you can kind of show the employer that you're well-rounded. So you may have something like academic honors or awards. You might have activities that include leadership positions, professional organizations, clubs, fraternity and sorority life, etc. So you can see from this example here that we've created a campus involvement section on a resume. We've literally listed the name of the organization, the role that we had, and then the dates that we participated in that involvement. And so moving on, these are a couple of additional sections that you can think about that may make sense for you. So for example, if you know languages other than English, you may want to include a language skills section and talk about those different languages and maybe, what your proficiency level looks like, and whether that is, speaking or reading comprehension or whatever the case may be. For some candidates or folks that have more of a technical background, so thinking through technology careers, engineering careers, careers that would involve working with data or any sort of technical application or that would require a technical skill set, it is probably going to make sense for you to do some sort of technical skills section. And so we've given you an example here of what that can look like for you. Additionally, it may make sense for you to list some relevant coursework, and this is particularly helpful for folks that maybe don't have a ton of experience yet, and so maybe you want to create a relevant coursework section to show employers some of the related courses that you've taken that relate to that role. And so as you're putting together a coursework section, I would recommend, listing up to 5 classes that may make sense for that particular role. And so if you want to see additional sections that you can include in your resume, again, scan that QR code. It's going to bring you to our career guide where you can check out some more of those sections. And so some examples of that may be like a research section or a project section that would also kind of help you with conveying relevant experience. Okay, so pause this video, take 2 to 3 minutes to work on an additional resume section of your choice. And again, that could be an honors, activities, or project section. So here are some tips you want to make sure you consider as you're putting your document together. It's important that you are consistent throughout the entire resume document. So that means being consistent in the font that you're using, the style that you're using. So in terms of font style, it doesn't necessarily matter what you're using as long as it's easy to read. So just kind of keep that in mind. We recommend that you stay somewhere between 10 and 12 point font. The size of your font may matter if you're trying to create, a document with a lot of content on it. Maybe you need to go smaller, but if you don't have a whole lot yet, then maybe 12 point makes the most sense. It's really just going to vary. And then you can go as low or as small as 1/2 inch margins all around your document. So if you decrease the margins, that's going to give you added real estate for your document. If you increase them to maybe 1 inch around, then you're not going to have as much to work with. So again, it's going to really depend on your scenario and what you're trying to build here. But ultimately, you want to make sure that your resume is well organized and easy to read. The order of your resume is super important. So going back to the fact that employers are only spending a couple of seconds on your resume, make sure that you put the most relevant information on the first page. And this is especially important if you have a 2-page resume, but make sure you put the most relevant information close to the top of that first page. Use those power or action verbs at the beginning of each bullet point. And you also want to use the tense that is associated with that experience. So if you're talking about an experience that was in the past tense, or in the past, you want to make sure that you're using past tense to describe that experience. And then follow that bullet point formula that we talked about a couple of slides prior. So again, you have the power verb plus what you did plus the purpose or the results behind it. So some things that you want to avoid when it comes to putting your resume together is you want to avoid including any sort of kind of personal demographic information like your marital status, your age, your date of birth, your race, those sorts of things. You also don't need to attach a photo on your resume. So in some countries outside of the US, this is common, but in the United States, it's not common to include a photo of you. The employer doesn't necessarily need to see that. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. If you are in the theater or dance space, kind of arts performance, that is going to most likely be something that you will include. But for everybody else, you don't need to include a photo. You also want to make sure that you're writing in third person. And so that means that you need to avoid using personal pronouns like I, my, and you. Because your bullet points aren't necessarily full, complete sentences, you don't need to include periods on the ends of your bullet points. And then it's really important that you are not embellishing on your resume. So you definitely want to be confident and you want to showcase your accomplishments, but you want to make sure that you're not embellishing anything, because then that can come back to haunt you potentially in the future. And then with this last bullet point, interests, references, and high school information, the high school information, again, that's going to really be dependent on where you are in your kind of journey. References available upon request, you don't need to include that. That's just kind of taking up real estate on your document. If you are going to present references as part of the application process, that's going to be something that the employer is going to request on a separate document. So that won't be part of your resume. And then interests, again, probably most likely doesn't necessarily make sense on your resume. That would be something that you could certainly include in your LinkedIn profile. So that would be the recommendation with that. And so one thing to note, in order to apply for any job in HireNiner, and if you aren't familiar with HireNiner, that's basically kind of like our job posting system that we use for UNC Charlotte, among other things. But if you're going to apply for a role within HireNiner, including on-campus jobs, you must have your very first resume approved. And once your first resume is approved, then you'll be able to upload as many resumes and other documents that you may need to apply, like a cover letter or a class list or a writing sample or something like that. So we have a resume checklist that you can find in several places, including our website, and then it's also in our career guide. And so the checklist is going to outline exactly what we're looking for in order to get that resume approval. But keeping in mind that what we're looking for is just kind of bare minimum. So if your resume is approved, it doesn't necessarily mean that that resume is something that you'll want to send to an employer. So keep that in mind, that you may need to visit us for career coaching drop-ins in order to get some resume feedback. So once you're ready to upload your resume, you are going to log into HireNiner, which is hireniner.charlotte.edu. And once you log into HireNiner, you'll be able to see on the top right-hand corner, there's going to be a little icon with probably your picture. You click there, click down to My Documents. And then when you see My Documents, you'll be able to add a new document there. Okay, so that's where you'll upload your resume. And then what will happen is it'll go into a queue, and we typically ask for 2 business days to get that reviewed. If your resume is not approved, we will let you know what it is that you need to change, and then that way you can make those changes and upload it again, and then it can be approved. So whether it's approved or not approved, you're going to get an email notification letting you know that your resume has been approved or it hasn't been approved, and kind of what the next steps are. Okay, so we have completed the section about resumes, and now we are going to move into cover letters. And so what you'll want to note here is that a cover letter is basically a document that is going to accompany your resume when you're applying for a role. Sometimes you might be required to include a cover letter in your application, and other times you might not be required. And then sometimes employers will also give you an option to include a cover letter. So if you have the option to do that, you may want to go ahead and write that cover letter, because it's going to give you another opportunity as a candidate to kind of sell yourself. And so the cover letter's purpose is basically to inform the employer on who you are, what you can do, why you're interested in the role, and essentially why you're qualified. It's a great opportunity to show your enthusiasm and your interest in that particular role and in the company. And it's going to allow you to expand upon the skills and the experience listed on your resume. So think of your resume as something that tells the reader what you have done, whereas your cover letter is going to go more into the why behind, what you did. And so these are the different components that we're going to cover. So we are going to cover the heading, the employer's contact information, the introduction, the body of your letter, the closing, and the salutation. And if you scan the QR code to get to our career guide, if you go to page 31, you'll be able to find an example cover letter that we've written. So pretty simple with your heading on your cover letter. You want to use the same heading that you use on your resume. This is going to help provide some consistency in your personal brand. Next, you're going to list the date that you're submitting the letter, followed by the employer's contact information. And so you're going to include the employer's first and last name, the company name, their address, the city, state, and zip code. And then you're going to address the letter by saying "Dear," and then insert the employer's first and last name. So it is really important that you address your cover letter ideally to somebody specific. This is also going to help you stand out more. And so sometimes the contact name is going to be listed in the job announcement. So look there first to see who you address your letter to. Other times you may need to do a little bit of research by going to the website to find an employee directory, or perhaps using LinkedIn to find the contact for the hiring manager. If you've exhausted all of your options at this point, I would recommend that you use something like "Dear Hiring Manager," or you could use something like "Dear Human Resources Representative." So in the introduction, it is important that you are clear and concise. So this is going to be about 1 to 2 sentences, basically stating who you are, why you're writing, talk about the specific position you're referring to, how you learned about that position, and essentially why you're interested in that position. So in terms of how you learned about the position, it may be you learned about it through a specific website. It could be Hire a Niner, it could be LinkedIn, it could be something else, or you could have learned about it from a person. So make sure, if that's the case, that you list the person that you learned of the position from. So the body of your letter is going to be pretty much the bulk of your cover letter. It's going to be about 2 to 3 paragraphs that talk about relevant information and examples. And so before you start writing this part of your cover letter, ask yourself how your qualifications match the employer's needs, and make sure that you're prepared to discuss those points so that you can relate your experience and skills back to the job. So use the job description as your guideline here. So when you're describing relevant experiences or skills, it's important to also, provide those examples. And so you could use the STAR framework here as a way to build out your story. So what we would call a STAR story. And STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And a lot of times we talk about STAR within the context of interviewing, but I think that STAR also has some application to writing an effective cover letter. And so as you're giving an example relating to a qualification or experience that you have, make sure you use that STAR framework. And then you want to also include the impact that experience had on the company or on the position, and then relate that story and that impact back to the role that you're applying for. So the cover letter body can also be a great time to address your interest in the role. You can talk about, maybe what you know about the organization that demonstrates that interest. So just use language that shows your excitement and shows your passion for wanting to apply for this role. So the closing is going to be about a couple of sentences. And here you're restating your interest in the position and the company. You might summarize your qualifications. You're going to list your contact information and also state your interest in an interview. So you could certainly say something like, I would welcome the opportunity to talk about how my qualifications meet the need of this role and of the organization. And then you want to thank the employer for reviewing your job application. And then the last part of the cover letter is the salutation. And this is where you would end the cover letter by saying something sincere, like sincerely. You want to kind of keep that pretty professional. You wouldn't necessarily say something like, best regards or something along those lines. And then you can list your name in script. So it kind of looks like you've signed it, but you're not really signing it because it's an electronic document. And then you can list your name as typed. And so to summarize cover letters, here are some do's and don'ts that you want to consider. So your cover letter is going to be about a page. It doesn't need to be more than a page. Again, your goal here is to clearly and concisely expand on your resume and talk about kind of the why behind what you did in that experience that's related to that role. You definitely want to tailor every cover letter to the job description. So it's not great practice to write a general cover letter. Just like we talked about tailoring your resume to the role, you want to do the same process with your cover letter. Address the cover letter to somebody specific if possible, like we talked about a few slides back. Again, be confident in your experience. Try not to draw attention to any deficits in your experience or skill set, because then that is going to show the reader that you may not seem as confident. And then again, it's going to come off as maybe not being the most qualified. So lead with your strengths and focus on those. And then tell the most applicable stories related to your experiences, which relate to the job itself. And so this is how you can connect with us. I would recommend using our career coaching drop-ins to get resume and cover letter feedback. We have drop-ins Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. So no appointment is necessary. You can, come into our office in person, or you can do a virtual drop-in via Zoom. And so we're located beside Atkins Library. Our website is career.charlotte.edu. And so that will provide more information about our office and about how you can connect with us on drop-ins. And of course, please follow us on social media. Our handle is at Charlotte Career Center, and we are on all of these social sites that you see listed below. Thanks a lot.